Hi, everyone. It's John Galante, president of AE Ventures, back with another Tech Home Builder webcast. And we've got a new face to me. And I know a lot of folks in this industry after 30 years, but I was lucky enough to meet KP Reddy, who is I think you're the principal owner operator of Shadow Ventures. And this is a venture capital company that's specializing in technology in the design built space. So obviously extremely relevant for us at Tech Home Builder. KP, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on yourself and Shadow Ventures for starters?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, John. I basically am a second generation civil engineer. So dad was a civil engineer, mom was a computer programmer. So this is what you get when that happens. Started off writing code when I was 13 for my dad. And then really after getting a civil engineering degree, worked in the fields for a good bit, worked with a lot of the major home builders like Pulte, D.R. Horton, Toll Brothers, Hovnanian, like all those folks, really on the development side and teaching them how to use instrumentation to accelerate development. Keep in mind, this is like 1994.
Okay.
So
when you say development, are you talking about land development?
Land development, yeah. Yeah, so really, how do you optimize land development? How do you optimize everything from land development, grading, cut fill type stuff? And so really used a lot of technology. I was kind of the only engineer with the computer in my office. Everybody else was still doing stuff by hand. And really got that experience with these kind of forward-thinking home builders that there was a bigger market. So I left that, it's a massive engineering firm, left them to start a tech company focused on construction management, leveraging the web. So this was 1997. And after taking some cash advances against a credit card, went to go build product and get out there. And within a month, got feedback that from the contractors and developers that the internet was a fad. It was going nowhere. It was for games. There was no commercial use of it. So I pivoted quickly and went into telecom because telecom needed project management tools. So I was able to pivot and grow that company from 2 people to 1,200 people in 3 years and went public and all that good stuff. So it was my first experience of this industry being behind, right, in a major way. Mm-hmm. And then so from there started another tech company focused on BIM, building information modeling. Sold that to a group in the Bay Area. I've written a book on it, taught for a little bit, went to go work for Frank Gehry and helped launch Gehry Technologies. Took some time off, ended up running Georgia Tech's incubator here in Atlanta. And then that's when I kind of decided I was at a point in my career where I really just wanted to invest and coach startups. So it turned into kind of something I was doing, kind of coming out of a sabbatical, started getting phone calls from industry leaders saying, hey, we want to invest in startups. How does that work? And these are construction companies, engineering companies, developers, everyone, building product manufacturers. So they kind of pushed me in. I would say they kind of pushed me into starting a firm. So 3 years ago, we launched Shadow Ventures. All we do is invest in startups that are pre-seed, seed, anywhere from design, development technologies, like a lot of big data on the development, design, BIM, et cetera, construction technologies, and operations and maintenance technology. So that's kind of where we sit. Yeah. And that's all we focus on.
Right. So more focused on the digital tool sets for the builders and the building operators than the installed technologies in homes and commercial buildings.
Yeah, we do have hardware. We have a company that does water leak detection called Kairos. That's an IoT play. Yeah. Generally where we stay away from, if it involves selling the consumer, we stay away from that because we don't know how consumer preferences. We let Apple and Google figure that stuff out. Gotcha. But when it comes to selling to builders, sending to building product manufacturers, people like that, that's still in our fit.
Gotcha. So the work you're doing and the companies that you're seeing, it really kind of puts you on the cutting edge, gives you a view into what's just over the horizon, because most of these early stage companies are trying to innovate or create new categories. So why don't we take a little tour through some of the market spaces, and if you can share some of your insights, what you think the hot new stuff is going to be. I think that will be helpful for our viewers. So we're going to spend a lot of time on multifamily, but let's start with single family, the single family builder on the tech tool side of things. Now, I would say the pandemic has been an inflection point for builders on digital tool sets, especially in the sales and marketing space, right, where they weren't going to be able to sell without presenting and closing houses with digital tool sets. But elaborate on that piece and anything else you see across the design, production, customer care side of things in terms of tool sets.
Yeah, I think kind of on the design side, you have BIM out there, but BIM hasn't really made it to the home builders that well. It's really been focused highly in the commercial space. We're seeing a lot more BIM tools in residential, purely driven because of prefab and industrialized, modular construction and all that. Because if you look at home building, and you don't have to design at a level of detail, because once they get out in the field, they kind of do whatever they want to anyway. So it's like you don't have to have, it's not a game of, eighth of an inch when you're designing, because it's not relevant in the field. But when you start talking about industrialized construction, when you have robots cutting wood or metal or whatever, it's a game of, 16ths of an inch, so to speak. So you're seeing a lot more design tools coming into the space to help designers operate at a level of precision in residential that they never have before. In commercial, you generally tried to operate at that level of precision, but now you're seeing that level of precision entering in the single family home. The other thing you continue to see is, how do I reduce waste? If you look at the price of lumber, if you look at what our commodity prices are doing, it doesn't look like, we're all going to be subject to high inflationary pressures over the next 5 to 6 years. And if you look at the broken supply chains and just everything that's going on, it becomes very meaningful every time you take a 2x4 and cut a 1/4 inch off of it to make something fit. All those little nubs of 2x4s that end up in the construction dumpster start to be very meaningful. So there is definitely kind of an optimization of how we use building materials and how we size things. A lot of times a builder will size things generically, whether it's an electrical panel or whatever, because it's just easier than sizing things specific to a building. So you're just seeing a lot of that optimization happening in design. On the construction side, we have an investment in a 3D printed home builder called Icon 3D out of Austin. We're seeing, they were kind of a market leader there. We're now seeing a lot more companies coming out. We're seeing a ton of prefab, modular. I probably talk to 30 to 40 startups a week. So if people, I tell people I have the best job in the world. I get paid to talk to the innovators and crazy people. It's either very eye-opening or very entertaining, right? So either way, I have a very fruitful day from 7 to 7. So it is interesting, a lot of movement in modular and prefab.
Yeah. So talk to me more about that trend. I mean, and we're addressing that in one of our new events, our Housing Transformation Summit. I mean, do you see it as being more incrementally adopted by the traditional stick builders versus them kind of throwing all their standard processes out? Or do you see them handling parts of their homes with panelization and prefabrication in a gradual way to more and more of the home being produced that way? Do you see them testing it in specific communities or on a project? I mean, what is the I would say that one of the reasons why we haven't made as much progress as we maybe should have in that category is because it's been seen as an all or nothing. And we start thinking about, I'm going to become a modular builder, instead of saying, are there modular and prefabricated components that can save me money, without totally disrupting my company? I'm interested in your views on that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Everybody wants to go after a Pulte large home builder. The reality is most of those builders, the large builders, are working in very large developments in the outskirts of a city where labor is still highly available. They complain about it, but there is labor that exists out there. There's plenty of space logistically, and they kind of have it down to a science, right? They've really optimized that. And so I think if you look at the market, that's the meat of the market in terms of dollars spent. And it's like it's too easy is the problem, right? It's too easy. So technology is meant to make things that are really hard, make them really easy. And if you believe that, I don't think there's a lot of innovation to happen out there. They have it down to a system, right? Let's not discount, putting 500 homes on a site, like you get it down to a system. There's repetitiveness and all that.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot more action happening in urban infill homes, and that to custom urban infill. So forget about like the idea. So the idea that automation is maybe, if you want to think about automation, is maybe producing the same thing over and over and over again. But if you think about mass customization, it's about building lots of things that are very different. They may have some core fundamentals, but there's optimization around customization, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at urban infill and custom, you don't have a lot of labor. You don't have a lot of space. You have this one little lot you got to drop a townhome into. Yeah. That's a lot of logistics, getting permits and all that. So if you think about that, if I can come in a week, drop in a 5,000 square foot custom home in the middle of downtown Boston, how much value is being created there versus a $200,000 home out in the middle of nowhere?
The question is, how many policemen will need to be there to guard the construction site in Boston? You can't do construction without police on the job site. It's part of their contract. And they flash the blue lights so that as you're driving by that construction scene, you get disoriented and crash into the construction site. It's really productive. But it's there for a reason, I guess. So interesting on the infill side of things. So let's talk about personalization a little bit in the single family space. I mean, are we headed towards that mass customization concept? Again, this is another thing we're addressing in our Housing Transformation Summit. Personalization on a schedule, personalization at scale. Now that we've got these digital tool sets to help the buyer in an appropriate time frame, in a time frame when it can still be profitable to select everything that they want in that house, and then we've got a way to flow that into production and do it profitably. I mean, are you seeing that there's going to be more and more adoption of personalization and customization kind of at that mass level, even on the production side?
I really do. I mean, and I'm slightly biased. You spend time with Frank Gehry, you become very biased about the world. And I think one of the things that is, when you look at the trends right now and younger people now buying homes, and, why didn't they buy homes before? Was it purely financial? I think a lot of it has to do with experiential and design and character. And I think, we do a great disservice. If you think about a home lasts 30, 40 years, we're designing and building something of great permanence. And then we're just going to cookie cutter them out and put some fake something on them. And we don't care. And it's okay if an entire subdivision, garage on the left side, garage on the right side. I think consumers are starting to demand more. And as I think you see people, low interest rate environment, et cetera, buying homes, they want something of character. In some markets like Boston or whatever, that's why people spend, very little on a home and then spend 3 times as much renovating it, right? Because they really care about having something of character. So I think in a way the builder community has to start stepping up around creating a true experience. And, instead of selling houses, they need to start selling homes. Yeah. And I think the technology, we all understand why they did it. If you ask a customer, would you rather pay 20% more for a home that's got character or one that's less? Customer preferences are like, yeah, no, I'd rather have square footage. it's fascinating. Like when you look in the multifamily market or in the, in town high-rise development, if you look at the per square footage dollars, they're out of this world. They're absolutely out of this world. But people are buying pretty, they are buying an experience, and they really don't care about the square footage. It's fascinating.
Yeah. We could go on and on. I mean, I think, and we got to get to the multifamily stuff, but I think some of the key concepts that we're really tracking on for housing, I think we're going to put this on our Housing Transformation Summit platform from a webcast perspective versus Tech Home Builder, because that's where we're trending on the content. But, how do we get new home order of magnitude differentiated versus used house, right, is number one. And personalization is one of the ways to do that. Another way is to incorporate innovative features more quickly than builders have historically. How do we get that same mindset that the consumer has on a new car versus a used car? We've got to get that in place for new home versus used house as well. And the digital tool sets are part of that. Are you tracking at all on utilizing digital documentation of the as-built home for a monetization strategy in terms of lifetime value? Because some of the statistics out there is 40% of the initial transaction price is spent after occupancy on maintenance, repairs, improvements, et cetera. And builders have historically just walked away from that.
Yeah.
And now that we've got these digital tool sets, we can do a better job of documenting as-built house. And then that's an asset that can be used to more efficiently service and maintain that home after occupancy as well. But, this ball has been punted away historically. Are you seeing any early stage companies poking around on that?
There's probably 3 in every market, right? It's kind of like people want to be the Uber of. There's an entire thread around being the Carfax of. So the Carfax of the home, there are probably 3 startups in every major market that's doing that, right? Okay. Because they've had early traction with builders that are more regional builders versus national builders.
Okay.
The other thing that you start to see is there's a major generational shift. If you think about the advent of Uber and food delivery, et cetera, there is a large part of the population that doesn't even want to drive themselves, much less swing a hammer, much less repair drywall, and in many cases don't even have the tools to do it, right? So there's a large population with all this gig economy stuff that really just wants to outsource things. And I think part of that outsourcing is outsourcing maintenance of the entire home, not just the lawn. And part of that is being able to understand, I went through this with my kids. They're going off to college. I was going to buy them a place. And then I told them, I'm not buying you guys a place. I'm just going to pay for rent. And they're like, well, why not that? It doesn't make sense. I'm like, I don't want to be your landlord. I don't think you guys can change a light bulb. Like, I don't think you can change the air filters. Like, I don't think you're going to make it a priority, right? Because there's not some light that comes off and says, that the filter doesn't show up to their doorstep with a video on how to install it. It's not optimized for the way they think. And I was like, that means your poor old dad's going to be maintaining, another home, which I don't need to do. So I think there's going to be a market there. It's just highly, highly fragmented right now. The Carfax of homes is highly fragmented. And then if you look at the app side of that, we've seen several app companies die on the vine because they just couldn't get enough velocity.
Right. All right. Well, let's shift gears into multifamily. Why don't we, start with the property owner / operator? I mean, we've got a set of tools that are widely adopted now to kind of bring down OpEx costs and cut manpower for potential leasing tours and that sort of stuff. But what's over the horizon in terms of operating that multifamily rental property?
Yeah, I think the biggest shift that's happened, and this is partly pandemic, partly just the cycles of an economy. A lot of the value add multifamily folks, I heard a stat the other day that pre-pandemic, multifamily properties were turning in terms of investors. It was like 18 months. Every 18 months, a property was being traded, which is insane, right? So there's been a lot of folks that have been doing value add, come into a B property, pretty it up with some tile and granite counters, up rents a little bit, release it, and then flip it to the next investor. And maybe hold on to the management contract along the way. And so you've seen this method. What's now happening is people are holding on to properties a little bit longer. So all of a sudden your net operating income starts to matter. And your investors want to know, they don't want to know the flip because now they've owned it for a while. They're going to be owning it for a good bit. And so they need to understand the cash flows versus the income from flipping it to the next person. So, so when you look at that, the investors are demanding more. The investors are saying, hey, if we're going to hold on to this property for another 3 years, I want you to squeeze every penny out of it. And that's looking in. And so once they start doing that, your investors are very savvy, right? They look into the details and they're like, why do we have a person in the leasing office? Why do we have a maintenance person per property when we have 4 properties within a 5-mile radius? Like, this is insane. Like, what are we doing? And so they start looking at all those detailed costs and ask questions. And so it's a real, I was talking to a large multifamily operator this morning, and he said there's never been a better time to be investing in prop tech and investing in technology as a multifamily property owner. And his reasoning being, culturally, it was already hard. It's always been hard to deploy technology because people are like, oh, you're trying to take my job. And there was enough money there to hold on to people. And now it's like, no, I don't know that I'll be able to employ you. And yes, I'm replacing you with technology. And so they have kind of the pandemic excuse to make change. And, anyone will tell you the hardest part of running a business is the people.
Right.
And if you can replace people with technology, it's more reliable. So you're seeing that trend. You're almost seeing kind of operators being given the excuse to reduce staff and implement more technology.
Yeah. And is the technology stack that's put in place for properties and communities contributing to its valuation positively too, or do you see that coming?
Absolutely. I mean, we're running this multifamily accelerator program right now. And it's just been fantastic seeing how quickly these startups are being adopted. I mean, we talk about accelerators. What is the point of an accelerator? Is to take a company that's very small and try to make them very big very quickly. Almost every one of our companies has like accelerated in 90 days, like off the charts. And partly because so many of our investors are multifamily owners and property managers, and they invested with us. They've said, yeah, I love that company. Let's put them in all 10,000 of our units or in all 5,000 units here. And so there's just a huge thirst and interest in this space.
Yeah. Are you seeing any of the in-unit or shared space technology companies on the multifamily side of things? I guess smart apartment is certainly a thing now, right? And you've got most properties in certain market bands, at least, that are new. There's going to be some level of smart apartment, and a lot of existing properties are being retrofit. What are you seeing there from a trend line? Where do you think we're going beyond light?
So, I get to talk to a lot of the largest multifamily folks, and I'll tell you what I think. They all have lots of opinions. I'll tell you what I see as a pattern emerging. One, a lot of multifamily operators are stuck in multi-year telecom deals. So when you look at, I want to come in and put in high-speed Wi-Fi. We sold an exclusive contract to AT&T for the next 5 years. We're hands off, right? We can't do anything. So those guys, the folks that are stuck in contracts are stepping away. Now, what a lot of them what they're looking at is once that contract expires, then let's do something different. So that's one barrier to really kind of smart home, because it's core infrastructure. So I think that has to shift where you have high speed, like you should have better bandwidth, as well as there's this trend that we're now seeing that's been around for a while, but we're seeing it in multifamily, which is edge computing. So if you think about it, if you're watching Netflix, you're going through a pipe all the way to a server somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and then you're streaming it back. The reality is Netflix could drop a server in the building and pattern out what are the most watched things in this building and actually have them sitting locally and not stream it all over the place, right? So you're starting to see the advent of little mini data centers in a multifamily place, and little server farms that have Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, whatever, all hosted there, which is also a revenue opportunity for the multifamily operators.
Yeah.
So you're starting to see this edge computing piece come in, but also there's going to be what I think is there's going to be core infrastructure that's required to be provided by the multifamily operator. But then beyond that, it's consumer preferences. Maybe you're a Google guy and I'm an Apple guy and the other person's a whatever. And just like you had bring your own device to work, BYOD happen, you're going to have the same thing in multifamily. I don't think the consumers, the tenants, I don't think they want you to put an Alexa in the room. If I want an Alexa, I'll buy one.
What about built-in video and audio in apartments? I mean, I just remember my apartment dwelling days, and I had them late in life as well as early in life. But moving the TV and the AV stack around and trying to find the right place in an apartment is a pain in the neck. And if you look at the price per pixel on a TV, TVs used to be capital goods, like a capital investment. TV now, you can get a 4K TV that's 60 plus inches for $500-600. So the cost per pixel, it's not like a consumer investment. You could bundle that with video services and just have it built in an apartment, so whoever moves in there, doesn't have to worry about moving and resetting. And what they've got in terms of equipment itself is probably obsolete anyway, and they're not going to think that hard about parting ways with the AV stack. So I don't know whether you see that being part of the equation of multifamily.
I think that's my point. One, give your customer a really big pipe, right? Give them all the bandwidth they need. And then we're seeing companies, there's actually a company in our incubator up in your neck of the woods called Imbue, and they're really focused on IoT integration. So if the operator has smart appliances, because no one's bringing their own oven into an apartment, right? And a smart fridge or whatever, and then you show up with your devices, I want it all to talk to each other, but they're all running on different wavelengths, on different protocols. Yeah. So in Vue, what they figured out is, I'm not going to get into the game of what IoT device, any IoT device, you plug in our gateway and it'll connect everything, right? And I think that's kind of the future, because everybody has little, to your point, some people don't even have TVs, right? They're just like looking at their iPad all day, right? My kids don't actually have a TV. They just would rather be on the AirPods in, watch their iPad or whatever, right? So, and so when you look at the AV stack, it's fascinating. My brother bought a house 20 years ago. And of course, me being the nerd in the family, I wired him with fiber. I put all these speakers in, all this stuff. And then when he sold the house, I was like, we never used any of this, because Wi-Fi showed up and Sonos showed up, and we never really got to use any of the wiring.
Yeah. Well, we talked about we've been talking about architectural audio for 30 years, right? But really, video has become more architectural just in the last few years, when you've got like frame TV from Samsung, and it can be art at one moment, and then it can be a TV for critical viewing at another. So things are certainly shifting there. Hey, I think you watched my my interview with Ray Kuninansky, who's from Columbia Residential down in your neck of the woods. But one of the topics that came up with Ray was in some of their affordable multifamily properties, they're actually required, I think, to provide a healthcare space. And we're researching some new stuff for rural America, and digital health is part of the equation. I'm just wondering whether you see, either for senior-oriented multifamily properties or in the affordable space, rooms being outfitted with digital diagnostic devices, or even high-resolution cameras and such, so that an examination or digital healthcare can be delivered conveniently in a multifamily space with tech tools like that.
Yeah, I've seen it a little bit in senior, right? A little bit in senior, so that if you need to have someone come through to draw blood or whatever, like there's these activities, so to speak, in senior. It was interesting what he was talking too about, like on energy, that you get a energy credit or whatever from the government for the affordable. And if you can somehow manage to come in under that, it's your money kind of thing, right? Yeah. And I think when you look at one of the things, the pandemic has really put a high contrast on the digital divide, right? And you look at rural America. I mean, it was interesting here in Atlanta when they said remote school, and they found kids like sitting in the parking lot. And like, why are these kids in the parking lot? It's like, well, they don't have Wi-Fi at home. Yeah. So they went to the school to get Wi-Fi off the, it's like, we just assume, we're in a bubble and we've done okay for ourselves. So we just assume everybody has a laptop and everybody has Wi-Fi. And I think when you go to rural America, you're hearing about it even more. Here in Georgia, our governor just passed a huge bill to light up all, he basically is like, everybody should have an IP address in the state. Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities to provide smart infrastructure. Yeah. We've seen some things around healthcare that's really interesting, especially in senior living, mostly, sensors in the kitchen, that if there's, it's like a smoke alarm kind of thing, but it also lets a loved one know, if your grandmother hasn't been in the kitchen for 3 days, yeah, what has she been eating? Like, what's going on? Yeah. Right. And so maybe you get an alert that says, hey, your grandma hasn't been in the kitchen for 3 days. You might want to check in on her. Right. Yep.
Very good. All right. Well, anything that we didn't cover in this scope that you think either builders or multifamily operators ought to know about next wave that's coming?
Yeah, I think what we really see happening is like true innovation, true disruption coming. A lot of this stuff today has been very incremental. Let's take something we did in notebook paper and put it into an app. Let's take something that we've done manually and automate it. And now what you're starting to see is a lot more disruptive, whether it is, hey, short-term leases, doing different things on the financial side, how you fund projects on the developer side. We're seeing just a lot of really creative models coming out. And I think we're now at a time, I think the industry has to stop worrying about innovating, because I think in the past it's been, well, we have to go do it because nobody else is doing it. Now people are doing it. So what they really need to do is be better equipped to scout, evaluate, and pilot technologies, because that's like a full-time job. Yeah. Right. Instead of trying to hire coders, which is not something they should be doing.
Good advice. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today. Stay in touch so we can stay in touch with what's on the cutting edge, and good luck to you and all your portfolio companies as you help with the revolution. Thanks again. We'll see you next time on Tech Home Builder or Housing Transformation. I don't know which. Thanks.